You're now listening to the sound of sanity. This sound will continue for the duration of the program. Hey everybody, welcome to Sound of Sanity. I am Nathan. I'm your humble and obedient host for all these episodes. Nigh on many years now, I have been that. And Ben, right there, he is the preacher who's a teacher of sanity.
Sweet. Here I am.
And there's one other guy here.
There is.
A fella, a dude, a man.
I was going to say that.
A mensch.
You took it out of my mouth.
I took mensch out of your mouth?
You did.
Oy vey.
Oy vey. Indeed.
Listen, why don't you... Yeah, I don't know any Jewish words for introduce. Why don't you introduce the man, the myth, the legend himself?
I will. It's Jacob Menzel, the pastor who's a master of sanity. Morning, Jake.
Morning.
Gentlemen, what is making you feel insane in the membrane today, if anything?
I feel pretty sane this morning.
Yeah, me too.
Huh.
All right, thank you for listening, everybody. No, we have at least one thing to talk about, which is some Disney Junior dinosaur show. What is this?
I just showed up in my Twitter feed, and it's the latest example of just the kind of, hey, you can't trust Disney, you can't trust Netflix, you can't trust anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll just play this video. I don't know what the show is. It's on Disney Junior. It's 3 kids, and they are observing 2 male dinosaurs sort of playing house around a couple of rocks.
Very little kid animation, CGI kind of, Bob the Builder style.
Yeah, this is tiny. So, here it is.
But those aren't eggs. They're rocks. Oh, so that's why they want to...
And these dads, which is how they're referred to...
Another dinosaur now.
Oops. It's how they're referred to in this video, are being very affectionate with each other and nuzzling each other and stuff like that. So every time we see them, that's the kind of thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
But those aren't eggs. They're rocks. Oh, so that's why they want to be around other dinosaur nests. These dino daddies want eggs of their own. They want a family. Aw, they'd be great dads. There must be something we can do to help them. There is. No. Lots of eggs that need loving parents to raise them. And too.
So that's the video. And I don't know how well you heard it, but it's just two male dinosaurs nuzzling each other while standing over a couple of rocks that they're pretending are their eggs or their family. And now these kids are going to solve the problem because these would be great dino dads. Because clearly they love each other, et cetera, et cetera. And so they're going to go and apparently, which I've not seen it, this is just that's the clip that was posted on Twitter. They're going to go and take the excess eggs from other mothers or from other families so that these 2 male dinosaurs can be dads together.
Wholesome children's entertainment.
Yeah. Disney Junior. So that's all. It's the kind of thing that Disney has said that they want to do and the kind of thing that Netflix has been doing. And so it shouldn't surprise anybody, but there is no show. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a boyish little show with dinosaurs and kids in cowboy hats. They're going to push their agenda on your kids.
I think it's nice to have examples like that in your mind because if you are talking to people like us, you can have a discussion about Disney grooming and stuff like that, and no one's going to disagree with you. It just seems obvious. It's what they say they're doing. It's what they do, and it's what they've done. But when they are confronted with it, their tactic is to say, no, we don't. Why are you accusing us of grooming? And you can actually, I can at least, be caught flat-footed by that because it is so brazen, because it's the same thing that they do with schools. No, we're not. We're not grooming. I mean, they just...
Yeah.
You'd think that would be easy to deflect an argument like that, but all you can really say is, well, yes, you are.
They control so much of the language in the media of how these things are talked about. So when it comes to Florida's bill to prevent your 24-year-old first grade teacher from talking to your 5-year-old son about, or 6 or 7-year-old son about sex, they call it the Don't Say Gay bill.
Right.
right? And then it's about erasing
Marginalized groups.
marginalized
Sexual
people,
minorities.
sexual minorities. It's
Mhm.
about erasing and suffocating and trapping these poor little kids and making them conform to gender norms or whatever it is. And it's you take a step back. All the bill is actually doing is preventing some fresh out of college, 24, 25-year-old sexually debauched person from talking to your 6-year-old about sex.
Mm-hmm.
No teacher of first grade needs to be talking to your 6-year-old about sex. And the bill just keeps them from doing that.
Nor would it occur to any teacher who's not a zealot for the cause.
That's right. That's right. And so, but they control the language. And so when you come to a question of grooming has been a great label, and now it's one that they're coming at from multiple angles. But that's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm. But the articles that say we're not grooming, just describe grooming over. You read, I think the WAPO maybe did a big, like, it's not grooming, or one of the big liberal outlets. I mean, they've all done them, but there was a big one about how it's not grooming. And what that article is just description after description after description of grooming. And they just redefine the terms and say, yeah, it's healthy sexuality.
Well, part of what the tactic then is, you by appending that label to people who are just trying to talk to your kids about sex in healthy ways, what you're doing is you're actually undercutting the real grooming that happens when kids are being talked to and introduced to sexual things by perverts who are trying to sexualize them and do bad things with it. And so they'll make it the individual case. They'll make it like the bad uncle who takes the kid into his lap and puts his hands in uncomfortable places and acclimates the kid to things that the kid shouldn't be acclimated to, right? In a very physical, personal way. And they'll pretend like there's some great big barrier between that and talking to the kids about sex and acclimating them to the language and ideas of sexuality at an age that is inappropriate for anybody to be thinking about those body parts except for when they go to the bathroom.
Well, and even if you wanted to make an argument, I do not, and I don't know why anyone would, but even if you wanted to make an argument for mommies do this and daddies do this, and like for introducing the facts of life to a kid that young, that's not by and large what we're talking about. We're normalizing perversion.
Yeah, and again, all the bill does is say it's the parents' place to decide the wins and hows of that sort of thing.
Any way that they want.
Yep. But Disney, once you're 3, 4, 5, and that's what this show looks like it's pitched to kids ages 3 to 6, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's Paw Patrol
Yes, it's
Paw Patrol. So they want to introduce those ideas and those concepts to your kids at that age. And that is, in fact, grooming behavior.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's right.
it doesn't matter if it looks cute. You just can't assume that anything is innocent out there. That's all. That's the point. And it's a point that we've been saying for years, and a point that I guess we are going to feel like we need to keep saying, because I think that probably the value in pointing this out is, I bet most of our listeners do a pretty good job of keeping the controls on what the kids watch at home. Then when kids go to grandparents' houses and things like that, grandparents aren't as tuned in, and they may be Christians, they may share the same concerns. Grandparents still want to just turn on Disney for the kids. And this right here, this video may be a good tool to just show a grandparent and say, look, this is why I really don't want you to flip on Disney or Nickelodeon for the kids, because it's not safe anymore.
Right. We're an HBO family.
Yeah. Not that it was ever safe, but it's much less safe today than it ever was. And I threw Nickelodeon out there for a second, and I was just like, man, has Nickelodeon ever not been groomy? I mean, the kinds of shows you guys have to understand, and this is the kind of thing that nobody wants to admit, but the degree to which butt humor has become central to the humor we introduce our kids to is in fact grooming behavior. It's a very pro-gay, because it is introducing kids and acclimating them to think about butts in a way that is unhealthy
Yeah.
and not normal and not according to their normal God-given use. And so
You've got me thinking about butt humor now. There are different levels, I would say, because Walt Disney, in his early work, this is a total tangent, a butt humor tangent, but you watch Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the way that the dwarves are designed and animated, their entire center of gravity revolves around their butts. They're always falling on their butts. People will poke things humorously into them. I mean, that's Porky Pig, that's Mickey Mouse, and I don't have a problem with that. That's just somebody understanding comedy and little characters and low center of gravity. I mean, my toddler walks like most of those characters do. She falls on her butt all the time, and she likes those characters, and kids like those kinds of characters. But then you look at Ren and Stimpy. You look at the entire...
Ren and Stimpy's exactly what popped into my mind as soon as Nickelodeon popped out of my mouth, right?
Well, Ren and Stimpy was just a perverse adult show. I mean, it's almost a bad example because it's so extreme. I mean, the more interesting case to make would be the Rugrats or whatever. I don't know Nickelodeon that well. But Ren and Stimpy was just vile. And it was just like, here's a butt. Ha ha. Isn't it funny? Isn't it kind of gross and funny and exciting? I mean, there was just something very groomy about that.
Well, so you have bounds of modesty and propriety, right? And those correspond to a healthy understanding of sexuality. And so this is a kind of thing that, I remember being in a parenting class once. I think it was taught by Stephen Baker or somebody. And he was talking about how your kids from a young age are violators of all 10 commandments. And somebody's like, how can a kid who's not sexualized violate the commandment, the adultery commandment? And he started talking about the connection between modesty and that commandment and the degree to which just being vulgar in relation to those body parts is immodest, and it is a direct correlation to that commandment and often trends that direction. So that the kids that are immodest and immodest in their humor about anything, or just perverse in their humor, end up being the ones that are also sexually debauched once they become sexualized. And I think it's true. And I think that a lot of these studios have understood that for a very long time, understood it better than Christians have. And so they've focused on every place they can get a foot in the door. They take it. And so that's why something like Sing, which I've not seen, but you just watch the trailer comes on or whatever for Sing, and you realize this is a movie that is going to specialize in butt humor and probably have a gay character somewhere in the center of it, or play with the trans or with drag, that sort of thing.
Well, and it's interesting as a cultural sign and signifier. It's interesting that butts would be the thing. It's obvious once you think about it. Like if you're gonna attack sexuality, and if you're gonna groom, and if you're gonna show a sexual body part, you've really got four options. You've got one thing on a man, one thing at a woman. You've got breasts, and then you've got
the one thing we both have in common.
The one thing we both have in common, and the one thing that is a sexual body part, and it's in a way, but is also other thing. It's just. It's just neutral enough that you can kind of slide in there and have a excuse, have plausible deniability. You can't do. I mean, when Bugs Bunny dresses up like a woman and he's got giant breasts, there's no question what Bugs Bunny is doing and what taboo he's violating and what he's trying to arouse in Elmer Fudd. And I think parents have always been a little bit uncomfortable with Looney Tunes adult sensibilities with that kind of stuff. Some people just give it a pass because it's Looney Tunes, but I think everybody's like,
from, a long time ago.
It's old, so it must
old,
be clean. But then if someone's a little bit smarter than they're like, oh, Bugs Bunny's dressed like a really seductive lady in a slinky red dress with giant curves. That's not good. But it's obvious. But then butt stuff, you can kind of be like, oh, well, is it?
And you can, listen, it's just not hard to make a connection between the lesser family-friendly movies and studios and the degree of butt humor, right? you're going to get more butt humor from DreamWorks than from 90s or early 2000s Pixar.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also going to get things that are much more crass across the board. And you have to be able to connect that and understand they're doing things. They're trying to do things with that. It's not incidental. Every decision in a movie is on purpose. Every scene, every shot, every joke, every line, every glance, everything is on purpose. And it's in there on purpose, is constructed, and it's constructed for a reason.
This is why you should listen to our podcast, Sanity at the Movies, by the way. We talk about this stuff every other week, I guess, when we release an episode. But I think one of the age-old questions is Hollywood an evil cabal that wants to... What's the word? I lost the word. That wants to destroy my children and everything holy? Or are they just kind of doing what they're doing because that's who they are? And
Yes.
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes. I mean, the answer is more and more. They are an evil cabal that says, hey, we're having meetings. I mean, there was the Disney thing, the expose that just happened where somebody filmed a Disney meeting where it was like, I am an LGBT person with a trans daughter, and I want to create more content like that in order to change the conversation in America and make people like this stuff. Let's start a propaganda wing. I mean, I don't think they said propaganda wing, but they said everything else in those words. So there's that.
We have the power to change the way that the world looks at this stuff through influencing children who consume our content. Let's enhance our intentionality about this across the board.
I also think there's an awful lot of people that are just simply guilty about their own depraved lifestyles. And when you're guilty about your own depraved lifestyle, one thing that you do to justify it and to feel better about yourself is draw other people into it. And so they're not directly trying to create propaganda. I would put somebody like Spielberg, actually, with all his blasphemy, which I hate in his movies. I don't think it's that he hates God. I don't think that it's that he wants you to hate God necessarily. I think it's just that he feels very uneasy about his relationship with God. And so the more he can kind of deaden your relationship to God, the more he can have a character say GD this or the name Jesus Christ, the more he can kind of feel better about his own seared conscience somehow. And I think that's historically been a lot of it, and that will always be a lot of it. Ultimately, the result is exactly the same, though. I don't know that it even matters.
Hollywood has always been led by perverse people. And so that's just the way that things are going to go. There doesn't need to be a conspiracy for things to go that way. But like Nathan said, more and more.
Conspiracies are the way, I mean, people getting together and deciding to do things is also part of the way things happen. And when it happens with bad people for bad reasons, we call that a conspiracy.
Once enough bad people get together and say, hey, we're all on the same page here, why don't we actually work a plan and develop our agenda, and we can be more effective and efficient than just sort of haphazardly processing our own demons and doing it. Well, look at how much we've accomplished just by processing our own demons.
Right.
What if we're all intentional and on the same page and made a concerted effort of it?
I mean, I think the reason conspiracy is maybe an unhelpful word is because in my mind, at least, it conjures people in robes around a dark fire. A virgin is dragged screaming out to be sacrificed, and then the High Lord of Darkness.
Have you seen the footage of Bohemian Grove, Nathan?
Well, yeah, exactly, Jake. That's exactly where I was going. A conspiracy can just be...
Have you seen the movie Dragnet, Nathan?
Yes, unfortunately. No. I've seen most of it on TV. That was a bad era of movies, can we just say? That whole... we're going to do a thing that Grandpa is nostalgic for, but we're going to try and update it. They did like the Beverly Hills with Ernest, and they did the Beverly Hillbillies, and they did Return to Gilligan's Island, and they did the Brady Bunch, and Flintstones was terrible.
Oh.
The only arguably kind of successful thing like that was Addams Family, which I seem to recall was...
I'm glad we live in an era now where we don't recycle IP from 20, 30 years ago. Or wait, no, we live in an era now where we recycle IP from 20 to 30 years ago, and this has never been done before.
Right.
Or we're doing it poorly for the first, or are we doing it well for the first? I think
we're doing...
I'm getting so confused.
I'm glad we live in an era, which is probably about to end, where we're recycling our IP instead of Grandpa's IP.
Top Gun. That's my IP.
You know what I think actually happened? I think Batman was so big and people actually mistakenly saw that as recycling IP. They were like, oh yeah, Batman, it's that thing, that TV show I grew up with, and now we're making one for the kids.
But it's dark.
Right. Which isn't actually what happened with Batman. That's not actually the story of Batman, but I think that's the way a bunch of studio hacks saw it. And so they're like, well, Batman was a thing on a TV show in the 60s, so was the Flintstones. People like that. Thanks a lot, Tim Burton's Batman. You did a lot of damage, Tim Burton's Batman, for being a crappy movie anyway.
But compelling.
That's right.
So I turned it on not long ago with the kids around, not intending to watch any of it, but except for the opening scene, just because I wanted to re-experience. It had been years since I'd re-experienced that opening scene. I remember the very, very first time I saw it was at the drive-in with my dad, and my parents were like divorced or just recently divorced or in the middle of the divorce. And it was just me and dad and my little brother who was asleep in the back. And so it was just this like big, epic, to me being like 5 or 6 years old, when it zoomed out and I realized it was the Batman symbol, it was like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Right? And so with Danny Elfman's score there just being as epic and ominous and foreboding and cool as any dark hero score of all time, I was just like, I wonder, I don't remember what, maybe it was probably I had just seen the Batman. It was just like, okay, I want to, now that I've seen the Batman, I've seen, yeah, Batman actually is cool. Like I'd forgotten how cool Batman can be. I want to go back and revisit this opening scene. So I did. I just flipped it on because I thought, oh, the kids will think this is cool too. Or maybe they won't. I don't know. It'll be interesting to find out. And then the movie kept going and kept going. And then I suddenly realized we're all sitting here engrossed in this terrible movie that is like going to go into some really creepy, dark places. And I just have to shut it off. But I just thought, when I flipped it off, I just thought, this movie is so oddly compelling.
It really is.
It's really oddly compelling.
It's one of those movies.
There's nothing about this movie in and out. Like if there's not one thing about this movie that you like. Like if you take any scene, any thought, any memory of it, none of it has a positive.
Even Nicholson has been such better Nicholson in other things, and like it's kind of subpar Nicholson. It's all, and yet every 5-10 years, whatever, I go back to it like a moth to the flame. Like it is just one of those things that.
Yeah. So I turned it off.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't finish it. And I've not had any desire to go back. But I know that if the kids are in bed and I go back and I'm just like, yeah, let me just see. Once I hit play, it's going to be over, and I will be there until the end. Yep. It's like I don't quite understand it. I'm not ready to figure it out. Patrons of Sanity at the Movies are going to have to make me do it. But which I'm excited about getting there, because I think it will help us unlock a lot about the relationship between our culture and our movies and ritual and meaning, as we've talked about it and been developing that whole concept over there. And we've talked about here some at Sound of Sanity. But yeah, patrons of Sanity at the Movies got to get their butt in gear.
Yeah.
Speaking of
butts,
get those butts in gear.
See what we did there? It's all connected.
Isn't it funny that we said butts? I just feel like I should.
Okay, groomer.
I just feel like I should say, though, I just feel like I should play the part of the person that's listening to this. And I know there's probably some who are like, wait a second. You went from saying Hollywood is a cabal of Satanists. You were kind of joking about that. But more or less, you said it's whether they mean it or not, they're grooming our kids, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly you were waxing nostalgic about a stupid movie and trying to tell us to go listen to and give money to your movie podcast. Do we really need a movie podcast to tell us that movies are terrible and bad?
So
yes, you do.
Here's the thing. If that is you, just do me a favor. Get an app or a piece of paper. Get a piece of paper and a magnet and put it on your fridge. Okay? And write down today's date. And then every single time you and your family over the next 2 months watches a movie or an episode of a TV show or anything on TV, go put a little mark. Go put a little mark on a piece of paper on your fridge. And if within 2 months you come back to me and you have fewer than 5 marks, great. I accept your criticism. But if you have 5 marks or more over the next 2 to 3 months, 1, you watch more than my family does. And 2, you need help thinking about it and learning how to think about it with your kids, because what you're doing and what you're telling yourself is, I am morally superior to the arts and entertainment industry because I get that it's all bad, and therefore I can passively consume as much of it as I want to whenever I want to and not have to think about it because I've already made an external judgment that it's bad. And what that is refusing to engage in the art of discernment. And this is what we do in every place in our lives. We make decisions about what content is good or bad. We try to do all of that work up front so that we never in the moment have to engage in the process of discernment. And so if you're watching anything regularly.
Yeah, what Jake didn't do is ask you to make a mark for every YouTube video, but what I think it would have been fair for him to do. Every YouTube video.
Every Instagram story or reel.
Every time you engaged with visual moving pictures that were trying to sell you on an idea, which is every time you engaged with moving pictures, you really ought to be making a mark on that piece of paper. Mm-hmm. But we'll be nice and say a movie or TV show.
Yeah, what we do is we're so good at kidding ourselves and deceiving ourselves and making ourselves feel morally superior because we've made decisions in our brains that Hollywood bad, movie bad, TV bad. Okay, I've made judgments. Now I feel good and I feel morally superior and I feel right. And then we go and we're like, yeah, but sometimes you just want to watch a movie and yeah, it's a good, wholesome family movie, and it fits in a category in my brain that I am okay with because it's old, or because I enjoyed it as a kid, or because it's animated,
or it's G,
because it's rated G, because we trust some rating system, or because of any number of things. It fits in a genre that I think is wholesome because it tells a hero's journey story, because it's got
men and women with men and women roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the number of people that, and part of why I want to give this challenge is because some of the very people who, on the one hand, have said to us, I don't watch movies and I don't understand why you do a movies podcast, also come back to us with the most outlandishly absurd, awful movie recommendations full of wickedness of every stripe. But they've got the one thing in that movie that they feel morally justified by.
That's why I spent so much time ranting
them to
about.
Give a huge pass over the rest of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's why I spent so much time ranting about The Northman, which is a movie that the conservative world has embraced simply because it doesn't have a woman with a sword hitting people and doing martial arts.
It has masculinity, real masculinity on display.
And you can listen to our episode to see what bunk I think that is. But what a reductive, stupid take to say, yay, we finally have real masculinity from the Viking movie.
Yeah, and that's the product of people with no discernment, but who look for a moral principle that allows them to justify an indulgence. And again, that is the nature of not having discernment. Mm. It is the definition of refusing to have discernment. I make a categorical judgment that if it has an element that I approve of morally, I can swallow the whole. Or if it has an element that I disapprove of morally, I can reject the whole. That's not biblical wisdom, and that's not biblical discernment. But that's the way that we want to approach things like entertainment. It's a very immature, childish, undiscerning way to approach it. And it's understandable that you have an immature and childish way of approaching it because you've never been taught to have a mature way of approaching it. And the whole genre of moving pictures is new, and the church hasn't engaged it in a very thoughtful way. That's what we are trying to do. And so the movies that we watch, all we're trying to do is have some kind of case study for us to hit up against ourselves and for us to teach ourselves and you and bring you along with us as we work out how to understand and engage with any kind of moving pictures in a thoughtful, discerning Christian way. And if you are an absolutist about this and say, no, all images are a violation of the second commandment, then you had better hold true to that. And if you hold true to that, great. I respect that. Excellent. No moving pictures for you. You leave the room if somebody turns on a TV. You don't have a TV or a phone in your house or a computer screen or whatever. You're a Luddite. Okay, that's a decision that you've made, but you still have to find your way forward to engage in the world that we live in. And so, okay, that's your way forward, but...
Is it going to be your kid's way forward? I mean...
Right, so...
Are we actually talking to any Luddites on this podcast of that stripe?
Well, they're presumably listening to this on some device, and that device is capable of giving them
images as well as
anything else.
I think it's worth saying, though, because I think there's people that tend that direction and that like to listen to these kinds of podcasts. And so
they have that kind of suspicion of like everything imagistic.
But certainly there are people who feel like life would be better and it would be easier if I could just finally talk my family into making that decision, into pulling that trigger. I think at the very least we've got that. So
I mean, in the last couple of months, if it has not been for this show, with one exception, nobody in my family has watched it. That's just the way that our life is right now. And it's happy for that. But the point of watching it for the show is so that we're constantly learning and growing in how we engage in these things. And when you have an artifact that is 30 or 40 years old, whether it's Jaws or Jurassic Park.
Those are the two we've got coming out next month. So
it's instructive because it tells you things not just about the art of movies, but where movies have been and where movies are going.
And therefore where culture was, where sexuality was, where morals and mores were.
And the interplay between the two, right? Like how much are our movies a reflection of our culture and how much are they leading the culture? And it's always a both and question, right? And so that allows us to engage with what's in theaters now and how kids are seeing those sorts of things and hitting those sorts of things. And it doesn't take a degree in film or a certain number of hours of sanity at the movies to watch this clip that we played for you at the top of this podcast and say, that's bad. Shouldn't let my kids watch it.
Mm-hmm.
But you do want to be able to engage and teach your kids to engage in every kind of media across the board in a thoughtful Christian way. And that's a big part of what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
This is a blank area in the churches. The churches has not cared, right? Insofar as the church has cared, it's been like classical education is good. Therefore, old books are good. Read old books, good. And so we have a whole show called The Bookening where we're engaging with classic literature. And guess what? Not all old books are actually good or good for you or good for your kids.
Well, you read something that's been so anointed, so people draw so many Christ allegories in something like the Odyssey. And it's just like, oh, braggadocio, revenge, murder,
sex,
violence,
sex,
adultery, particular.
Brutal revenge, like over the top revenge. I mean, I don't know, maybe we could argue about the suitors, but I mean, come on. It just goes on and on. Bloodbaths. And people don't even...
Nobody has ever read the Odyssey and fantasized about being trapped to the goddess Circe's bed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on.
And nobody's ever read the Odyssey and thought, man, that guy looked at my wife wrong. Wouldn't it be cool to put an arrow through his neck?
Yeah,
and then slit his girlfriend's throat. I mean, honestly.
And then all of his friends.
Right.
Yeah. Me and my son Telemachus, we're just going to destroy everybody.
But here's the other thing that's worth saying. The Odyssey has lasted this long because it is compelling, because the poetry is gorgeous. And you have to deal with that too. You can't just say, well, this is a bad thing, but we need to examine the bad thing. Discernment requires you to say, well, okay, what is actually beautiful about this? Why do we love movies so much? What is compelling about this art form? What is interesting? What is worth valuing? if anything, and you can't be cheap like the Gospel Coalition and say, well, it's because it's all reflected to Jesus or something, magic wand.
Just like the chips in a vending machine are an allegory of Christ if you want them to be.
Right. That you could be cheap.
Which is an actual article that the Stupid Gospel Coalition published in the last month.
That's right. One that we didn't, I guess,
But
engage yet. But yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
It's like you can't parody this stuff anymore.
No.
Yeah.
I'd actually like to do an episode about the vending machine. Maybe we'll get to that. But because I think it's actually...
No, I think
it's interesting.
There's something there to talk about besides it's stupid of it all.
Right. I have some sympathy for the dude that wrote the vending machine article. I will say that much as a teaser for this eventual episode that maybe we'll do. But in order to engage with movies, because I think somebody might hear us talk and then they'll go to our podcast and they'll be like, okay, why are these guys saying this is wonderful? Or why are they excited about this? Like, where's this coming? I thought this was just going to be analysis, discernment, and cold, hard facts. And what I'm encountering is that they like some of this stuff.
Like Jaws.
Yeah, exactly. Jurassic Park was a seminal moment in their childhood.
They said the Batman was a good movie. Don't they know that the Batman has
Stuff?
Yes.
Yes, we do. I know that the Odyssey has stuff too, but in order to deal with the Odyssey, I have to deal with the fact that the wine dark sea is an amazing phrase and that it's got all these things that we like. I have to be able to use real discernment to put all those things together in my head and then accept, reject, or do something with it. And that's just part of it.
Yeah, and the fact is, like, again, when it comes to art and pop art, for goodness sake, y'all have kids who have this thing called AR goals at home. Listener, do you have a kid who has an AR goal?
That's advanced reading? Is that what that is?
Yeah, accelerated reading. Accelerated reading goals, they take all kinds of books, they assign grade levels and point levels to the books, and then they incentivize your kids. They have to meet AR goals every quarter or every semester, and it's all about point accumulation. And then they have their libraries, and we've talked about this at length in various other episodes of Sound of Sanity. But your kids, my kids, I have 7 of them now in school. All of them have AR goals that they have to meet every quarter, and access to a library at their Christian school full of trash and easy, cheap points, and a real poor evaluation of points. And so you look at some classic lit, like Charlotte's Web gets way fewer points than like a Hunger Games book.
Really?
Yeah. Or whatever else, a Rick Riordan book.
Because whatever their metric is for length, for word count, for language. It's like E.B. White is short, and he probably is writing at a third grade level as opposed to the 6th grade level that Hunger Games.
We did a whole, I don't know if we ever did this on an episode or behind the scenes, but we did a whole evaluation, or maybe we just did it in Slack, but a whole evaluation of just like classic, excellent, wholesome books versus the kinds of young adult tripe and the point levels. And it's like they're incentivizing your kids to read all kinds of trash. And they're blowing through it fast because they're getting their point goals, and they're doing it sometimes in school or in the school library during their library time. And you're not evaluating everything that they read, and it's not possible to. And it's really, really challenging to stay ahead of all your kids and what they're doing, because the schools don't care. The private Christian school doesn't care. It cares about results. It cares about points. It cares about incentives. It cares about test scores. And so your kids are consuming trash. They just are. And there's very little that you can do about it, except be aggressive and proactive as a parent, which we've done. And we've been the bad guys in multiple cases where we've said, hey, there's a rape scene in this book. Did you not know that? Take it from the library. But that's me. I have to do that. My wife has to do that. My wife has to figure that out. Right? And it's like, or my kids. Thank God some of my kids have a tender enough conscience. They'll be like, yo, this book has this in it. But the point is, your kids are not growing up in the same world that you did. And they're going to inherit a vastly different world than we have now, even. And they've got to be prepared to engage with all kinds of propagandizing pop art from all different sources, from all different sides. whether that's in books and literature, music, movies, TV shows, social media, TikTok, whatever.
Well, and one of the reasons they have to put up with all this is because you grew up with a bunch of pop art that was propagandizing you, and you let it, and you didn't think about it.
Yeah, that's what I was just
No
going
one
to say.
ever thought a thing about it.
Yeah.
No.
And so then you think it's okay up to a point. It's okay for them to be propagandized to the point that you were, but no farther.
Which is exactly what the Daily Wire is doing with their entertainment division. They're not trying to create new art that's good and wholesome.
They're only trying to reset 20 years.
Or maybe 40, maybe back to James Bond circa 1965. Yay!
Well, that's like 60.
That's
but
like 60 years, yeah.
Yeah, I guess, man, we don't live in the late 90s anymore.
No, we don't.
Do we,
No,
gentlemen?
We don't. No.
But we're going into the middle of the 21st century. Wow.
Like the dinosaur, Nathan.
But let's get Gina Carano to play, instead of their style of feminism, an older style of feminism. Is just so depressing. But
Yeah, I really think we have inherited, well, this just sounds like a disrespectful thing to say, but I mean, our parents weren't taught to think carefully about movies, and we've inherited their lack of discernment. And I'm not trying to be a jerk to my parents. It's just a fact that people hadn't thought through images, unless you were a New Yorker film critic, in which case you understood exquisitely every perversion,
right,
and approved it, probably.
But it was like those were the choice. The choice was turn off your brain and see whatever you decide is still okay, whether it's Disney, whatever, or be a New Yorker film critic that approves of every exquisite perversion. Like those were the only two paths that you had.
Or shut it out entirely.
Yeah.
But what we find is that the people who say they shut it out entirely or pretend to shut it out entirely don't actually do that. Mm-hmm. And so you have this whole category of person who's just an absolute unself-aware hypocrite, right? I reject television and moving pictures, except that I binge them when I want to, undiscerningly. But I still reserve the right to be critical of you if you ever watch them or talk about them. And
I would never listen to Britney Spears' hymns to fornication. I would only listen to Jimi Hendrix's hymns to fornication.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Let's hold for applause.
Good job, you. Well, it's just the exact same thing over again. You've not actually advanced the conversation and figured out how to take those next steps. And so, okay, somebody's got to step outside the cycle and figure this stuff out. Somebody's got to work their way through this stuff. And work it all out. And we're the heroes that you need.
Right.
Or not.
It's not that every episode we've ever done is perfect. It's not that Sanity at the Movies is a perfect show done by perfect heroes. But I do feel like we're trying to exist in that arena, recognizing what the arena is at least. And unfortunately, I don't see a ton of that out there in the Christian world. I mean, if I want something insightful about movies, I do go to the pagans first. I think we'd probably all agree with that, because
of course nobody else has given it time or thought to it. The closest that you get is
Brett McCracken, right?
Brett McCracken, exactly. And the best that he's got is, I have learned from my biblical theology class how to read redemptive art, the Old Testament in a redemptive historical fashion. And from that, I've been able to extrapolate and read a movie script in a redemptive historical fashion.
Which is just
so I can do the art of biblical theology anytime that I watch a movie and see, I've been trained to see only redemptive historical arcs. And all of that, a lot of it is straight up actually borrowed from just Carl Jung and his disciples. And people don't even know it. People don't know that's where it came from. People don't know the degree to which the modern biblical theology movement is inspired by Carl Jung. And it's not that it's wrong, but they just haven't developed the ability to see and understand scripture or life or movies or movie scripts in a more mature, broader way. And this is the kind of thing that you have to be able to think about if you're going to think with any kind of genuine discernment or any kind of genuine criticism when you come to things like that. It is not a revelation that most movies have a redemption arc. That's by design.
Mhm.
And you can sit back and be a complete ignoramus and Dunning-Kruger effect your way to thinking that you've got some kind of insight. But I don't know, why don't you read an interview with George Lucas talking about how he designed Star Wars from the beginning? It would teach you much more about the way movies work than sitting back and trying to apply a couple of hermeneutical principles that you vaguely remember from seminary to a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Sorry, I'm just disgusted by that whole... I've got my redemptive historical shotgun. Hey, Tarantino. I brought down that bird. I'm pretty sure it's full of lead and you don't want to eat it now, but whatever.
The other thing that I think that these guys could stand to do that would help them is try to create something.
Mm-hmm.
Just try to actually create something. And the more you try to create something, and you don't have to be especially good at it. I don't care what people think about DeVille or Chip and Lance. I think they're pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
Try to create something and then try to do it without intentionality. Because what these people seem to think is that these great artists just sort of like things pop out of them and they don't understand them. They don't understand why or how the movie they wrote and produced and directed every single shot of and designed, from scene composition to score to everything, is the way it is. It just kind of happened, and we need a Brett McCracken to sort of step back and let them know that they're actually tapping into their longing for the divine transcendent.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this like weird sort of concept, which we've talked about at length, especially on the bookening of the genius and the way that all this works.
Well, and even insofar as things do pop out of people, we want to think that therefore they're not derivative of that person's personality. They're not based on that person's fears, that person's sense of morality. From our work, I remember one time I put in a script a character talking to themselves in a self-hating manner. And Jake's like, why is this character doing that? Those two other characters did that. And you had a scene like this here. Why is everybody looking in a mirror and saying these things? Well, it had never occurred to me in a million years. Like, I didn't even remember doing it before. I just write that way. It just popped out of me because I've looked in a mirror and talked to myself that way, because I have that, I'm in tune with that kind of self-contempt, that brand, that style of self-contemptuous talking to yourself. And so a lot of characters have that if I'm writing characters. And that's not a conscious decision.
Right.
That's not it's entirely intuitive. And yet it is a moral decision. It matters. It's painting a worldview. Like it has weight to it. I mean, it just sprang forth from the artist. In this case, it did. But for one thing, I think we deleted it because we didn't want that to spring forth from the artist for this character at this moment. Yeah. I don't even remember what
I don't remember either, but it was just like, it wasn't what we needed from that character.
Yeah, at that moment. There have been other places where it's like, oh, well, this person would have that self-contempt, and it's
absolutely who that character is, and let it go.
And maybe one of the reasons the character is like that is because this character's forming itself around the things that his or her author knows. That's fine. But
and not just fine, unavoidable and inescapable.
Unavoidable, inescapable, and good. I mean, one of the things I have to offer is a primer on how self-contempt works and feels and stuff. Okay, great, good. It's my contribution to the artistic world. But it doesn't mean that doesn't have weight and meaning to it. It doesn't mean that there's not. I mean, it's ridiculous to even say that when I put it when I paint the process that way. It's like, of course, but somehow we have this assumption that, well, it just kind of came out of them, and so it's just kind of its own thing. The characters are just doing things. The camera's just pointed somewhere.
The camera's just observing the things that it's just like people don't get the concept of frame and shot composition, that everything, like they actually enter the world of the movie so immersively that they can't even step out of it for their criticism. Enough to see the camera as a character and a shot as being designed with any kind of, they actually think, for the purposes of their analysis and criticism, that the camera is passively observing a situation that happened to arise. And that's the way that they approach this sort of thing. The camera is just sort of capturing from a God's eye view these circumstances that happened and put themselves together.
Which is just like, if you've ever held a camera, I mean, Ben, you've done video work, I've done video work. It's like, some of it may actually be somewhat passive in the sense that it's intuitive, in the sense that, or maybe sometimes you even just, if you're filming a wedding or something, you set up a camera in the corner, you just let it go. But at some point, you're going to put that footage together. At some point, you're going to edit it. At some point, you're going to decide, well, the camera dispassionately happened to catch all these things. Does my audience therefore need to see all of them? I mean, the example I'm thinking of is just, you set up a camera dispassionately. Let's say you put a camera in a corner to record a wedding rehearsal. What you will almost always get is immodesty, because people are immodest all the time. Sometimes just because they dressed poorly, sometimes because they bent over or the camera caught them in the right direction. It happens all the time. If you're godly, or even if you're not, you actually edited a lot of it out in your life. Like, you look away, you shift your vision, you see someone in your periphery and you let it stay in your periphery because you don't need to see that right now. Camera doesn't do any of those things. Camera just stares. But when you're going back through the editing, you could be like, well, okay, that person revealed something there, or that person did something there. Am I going to include that? And it can be pretty easy to say, well, I'm going to let the camera be passive there because I want to include these things. I want the plausible deniability. But you're making a conscious decision every time. It's called editing. And so, yeah, it's possible. In a big Hollywood production, if a woman in a slinky red dress walks by in the back of the frame, it's because somebody cast her, somebody dressed her that way, somebody choreographed it. We spent hours and hours getting that little thing that your eye goes to for a second. But even if we didn't, even if we were just doing some footage on the street and some lady walked by, we still had to make countless decisions for that shot to end up where it was, when it was, that take. I mean, I guess maybe the performance was just so good in that one close-up that had that one immodest thing in the back. Our hand was forced. But that's bogus. Yeah. Okay. So listen to Sanity at the Movies. No joke. Good show. One of the best that we do, in my humble opinion. Listen to The Bookening for our other kind of, the other prong of our pop cultural criticism, or more high culture in that case, I guess. We got our high culture show and our pop culture show. And then we've got this show where the two meet in perfect harmony. What else? Go to patreon.com/Sanity to support this show. Be part of our Discord. Some fun discussions going on. We tend to dump notes and ideas for shows and links to articles and stuff there. And so you'll see stuff that never makes it to an episode like this, but is really interesting. And you'll get to talk to some nice, intelligent people, including ourselves. And is there any other business? No. Until next time.
Stay sane.